0079.
You speak Chinese?
Yes, I do.
That's
Or
impressive.
no, was it no, 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 Sim Davids. Working on my Russian.
It's very good. Okay, thank you guys.
Yeah. And just give us 1 second. I'm just gonna steal one.
If it's too cold, let me know and we'll put the temp up later.
Спасибо, дорогенькая.
30 people.
It's very good.
小心以为你肚子里有孩子.
So that's Chinese now. Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah, we typically will chat in Mandarin, but we've been working on my Russian. I've really only been focusing on that for like, maybe 4 months now.
What's
So yeah, haven't. Yeah, I'm getting there. Here's a little better than mine.
A little better.
Чуть-чуть.
I think I could get a little more credit than a
И
little.
чуть-чуть хороший. Чуть-чуть хороший.
It's great to see you, Jack.
Awesome to be here, Jason. Awesome to sit down with you. Thank you for coming back to DC for this on very short notice.
Well, hey, you know, I wanted to come to see you. I was so impressed the last time we met when you told me that you have a background in naval intelligence.
That's right. So yeah, I enlisted in the Navy. I went IS, so that's intelligence specialist, and then I was able to get a commission after a few years into the officer side, and so it's become 1835, which is a naval intelligence officer.
Wow. And so, because I think a lot of people, myself included, I see you on Periscope, going over to Comet Pizza and all the things that first introduced me to your, independent news style. I had no idea you had this kind of background. It's really very interesting. So the question that comes to mind, because, we see people in the CIA and everything, you never know when these guys are out. How do you balance that between being a former intelligence officer and now delivering the news?
Well, I mean, the same thing is, you break everything down, it's the essential search for truth, right? The idea that you've got sources and methods that you use in the intel field. Obviously, those sources and methods are a little bit more Gucci than what I've got now. But Rebel Media, where I'm doing the DC bureau chief,
right.
we're not too much of a slouch. We've got some sources and methods of our own that are pretty nice every once in a while, and I don't really reveal those. But the end goal, right, the end state is the same, is that search for truth.
Right.
And then, and this is something you'd be very much drilled into you as part of your intelligence cycle, it's not just the search for truth, but the dissemination. You process it and then disseminate that truth to actually complete the cycle. So you're disseminating it for the intelligence cycle, that would be, key policymakers, warfighters, depending on the level of what you were working on, different controllers, avionics, if you're working with aircraft or something like that. So you're making it sure it gets to the people that it needs to get to, right? So in this sense, I'm figuring out the truth. I'm searching for that truth. When I find it, I compile it into a YouTube video. Usually it goes up on Rebel Media. If I've got something breaking, I might throw it up on my Periscope or to Twitter if I absolutely have to get it out right that moment. But then we'll disseminate that to the public
right.
in the same way that I would disseminate intelligence along those intelligence channels. So it's in many, many interesting ways, it's a lot of the same skill set, right? Because you're taking in massive amounts of data, you're churning through it, you're figuring out, you're validating, you're assessing credibility, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. You've got your we call it analysis of competing hypotheses at
right.
times, So we found out something happened, what was the cause of it, what happened, how did it get to that? And you look at ways, you try to eliminate bias as much as possible. And I've been through years and years of training, years and years from the US government, from the US military, from the intelligence community, to be able to learn how to assess information, how to assess raw intelligence. So
right.
source information, human intelligence, that walk-in, that man on the street person that, hey, I got a tip, right? Well, how do you know if the guy who has the tip is trying to lean you in one direction,
right.
is trying to get a little bit of
Disinfo,
this,
whatever
it's
it
got
might be.
disinformation, right? And there's ways you can validate that, there's ways you can try to back that up. And then once you get a good source, and this is getting into source handling now, once you get a good source, then it's the idea of, okay, how do I manage that source? How do I manage that relationship? How do I make sure that relationship is good? How do I make sure that, okay, you gave me something that was credible on Monday, but does that mean the thing that you're giving me on Wednesday, on Friday, the next week, etc., is it all still good, right? And that comes down to placement and access. What was the source's placement? What was the source's access? Where were they? What information did they have access to? A great example could be, I'm at the White House now, right?
Yeah.
I literally work at the White House.
It's amazing.
I'm in the press room right there, and it's, believe me, for a kid out of Norristown, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philly, it's I can't even believe
Dream come true.
that I am standing on the same ground that Lincoln,
Yeah.
Roosevelt, Kennedy, FDR, all of the greats, Reagan, that walked that ground, Adams, they were there. Not Washington. He wasn't at the White House. But it still blows my mind. But so I've got that placement, right? But at the same time, I don't have access deep into the West Wing. I don't have access to the Oval Office, even though it's right around the corner from where I sit. I don't have access to those areas. So for me, my placement, sure, I've got great placement, but my access is not that deep in terms of, I can't just walk into the Oval Office and say, hey, Mr. President, what are you working on today? Can can Rebel Media
But you
get
do
a
have
scoop
a bit
on
of a
that?
relationship with Mr. Trump and Donald Trump Jr., I think you've mentioned, don't you?
To an extent, definitely more with Junior than with Senior. Something along the lines of, Senior, the president at this point, definitely would be able to, he recognizes me. He usually kind of will sort of say, and especially now when I see him, quite frankly, almost every day.
Yeah.
There's more of like a familiarity going along. He bumped into each other many times on the campaign, but of course he was traveling so much that it was, who's that guy that keeps always, showing up here when I was doing Citizens for Trump.
Right.
And then Junior, through Twitter. And I think that Junior uses Twitter quite a bit more. He has more time to actually read Twitter and go through Twitter. So he's retweeted me a few times. We've been able to share DMs every once in a while. So definitely more relationship with Junior. With Senior, I think he recognized me. I don't know if he knows my name, by sight. I'd like to think he does.
Right.
But
no, I think he does. I think he certainly does. Now, what you were saying before about source handling and disinformation, obviously that's a huge danger, not only in the intelligence world, but I think we're seeing an unprecedented disinformation campaign being, sort of executed against the American public by what was dubbed initially by the Washington Post and later by the president, rightfully so, as fake news. It seems like an incredible amount of disinfo.
It's interesting that this whole idea of unnamed sources, right, has become so incredibly bandied about, this political issue of whether or not it's okay to use those, and at the same time, when so many stories, right, from the Washington Post and the New York Times have later proven to be completely fabricated, complete falsehoods, that were these unnamed sources actually true or not? And when I was going, it's funny, I actually went to school for political science and broadcast media. So you believe me, my mom is very happy that I'm actually using my degree, in my career. We study that a lot, and the idea, Woodward and Bernstein, right, protecting the identity of Deep Throat, protecting the identity of your sources. And they drill it in, you protect your sources. You are only going to be as good as your sources, and that's true for detective work, that's true in the intelligence field, that's absolutely true for a journalist, investigative journalist. So, and I would protect my sources. I am willing to go to jail to protect my sources if I have to. That being said, there is a temptation, I think, among the mainstream media to invent sources to push a certain narrative. And we saw this really start to kick into full gear last year during the campaign, and especially as we saw the Washington Post being purchased by Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is, from Amazon, of course, a lot of ties to the intelligence community there, $600 million contract. The New York Times getting that line of credit, that financing from Carlos Slim, the Mexican
Most people don't know about
billionaire.
this stuff.
We want to talk about foreign influence. Let's talk about foreign influence. There's a Mexican billionaire that has a huge stake in New York Times.
Right.
And people say, okay, there's no editorializing that goes on there.
That's
all
not
right, but
exactly.
it's hard to say that when you've got someone that's political, stance would necessarily be, a huge blow to this guy's empire. And people don't know about Carlos Slim. He's tied to track phones, right? He is like the Mexican track phone lord, and not drug lord.
What exactly is a track phone?
Those prepaid phones that you get with like the cards, and I know it sounds kind of silly, but those ways of calling back and forth between the U.S. and Mexico. He also is tied into the remittances. He found a way to get involved in that. So
wait, you're saying people making payments from the phone?
Right. So
See, this sounds remarkable. Sorry to interrupt
every
you.
transaction, he's getting a
But
transactional
not
fee.
only
his
that,
company.
because it sounds remarkably similar to what's gone on in Haiti with Digicel. They put in, after the earthquake, the Clinton Foundation went in there, and Digicel, which is a company owned by an Irish billionaire, I believe, who's a huge donor to the Clintons, now everyone is using these Digicel phones that also have a payment system, and it's almost taken over the citizens' use of transactions.
Yeah, and that is very much where a lot of Carlos. He's since diversified into a lot of different
But
things.
that's an incredible
but
amount of control.
He first got his billions from that. Getting into that market and really controlling it across Mexico. And he got to the point where I'm fairly certain he actually had more money than Bill Gates at one point.
Wow.
People don't realize this.
No.
I mean, completely untold stories. But again, that maybe is asking the question is to know the answer in
Right.
that case, because why don't people know about this guy? Why don't people know that this guy is in control of the New York Times? At least from a financial standpoint, we can only speculate as to what level of editorializing content he has. So getting back to the unnamed sources question, now we've seen this stream, it seems, of attack against first candidate Trump and now President Trump from these mouthpieces, the New York Times, the Washington Post, certainly coordinated. We saw it last week, this huge coordinated attack where all of these pieces dropped immediately as Air Force One took off on President Trump's first flight. I said it reminded me of when Gorbachev went off to Crimea and they launched a coup against him in Red Square, and then the tanks came in and said, "Oh, you're not allowed back." I don't know if H.R. McMaster is going to be driving the tanks down Pennsylvania Avenue anytime soon. I certainly hope not. I would expect not from the general. But we're seeing this come out, and then of course those stories get amplified by the TV news, so cable, MSNBC, CNN. It starts with the print, and then it gets recycled and repeated again and again ad nauseum. And what's interesting, though, is that a lot of the times we were seeing the sources getting knocked down as being false. The story would be completely, the Comey memo, that idea that Trump said that I'm firing, or Trump tried to tell Comey to, drop the investigation because of Flynn, because it was going to hurt him or tie him to Russia. Well, now Andrew McCabe has said that's not true. Comey, under oath, kind of said that nobody's ever done that, and they're trying to parse it. Well, he didn't specifically say Trump. No, he said nobody that was
like 2
superior
weeks prior
to me tried to stop any investigation for political reasons. That would be a huge deal. I've not seen it happen. And then just today, John Brennan, the former CIA director, was put to the question, and he said, "No, sir." He said, "No, sir." So those stories completely debunked. But what's interesting, though, is that this very latest round of leaks that's come out, the nut job leak, for example, or this idea that that ISIS wanted to use laptops as bombs. And people were saying like saying that to the Russians was some sort of revelation sort of headline. There's worldwide news a couple weeks ago. Those leaks were true, though. Those anonymous sources were true. So now we've got a situation where there are people in the White House, in the Trump administration, or in a sense, at least attending meetings from the Trump at the White House with the Trump administration that are leaking to the news. And actually, so what I've been told on this, and I'm kind of sitting on it because it's not my story, but the story is being written very soon, that one of the people who was identified as one of the leakers, it's not a White House staffer, but it's a congressional liaison. So someone, who's coming from Congress, attending meetings, then going back and leaking about it.
Wow. It's interesting because all of this sort of comes together into what is really the biggest story right now, which is the whole, Russia hacked. And although this is being actively blocked from the mainstream media.
Well, not proven Russia
Not
hacked.
proven, but that's the story. It's really coming down to, did Russia hack, or did Seth Rich or someone else, did they leak? Is it a leak or is it a hack? And the amount of suppression for the Seth Rich story, in terms of where's the evidence from the body cameras of the police, why has the investigation into his murder stalled? They say it's a robbery, but nothing was stolen. So, it's so interesting to me how that's being suppressed. And the way they do it is they just come out right away and they say that's a debunked conspiracy theory. But they don't tell us how it's been debunked.
Yeah, and so this is another example of what the mainstream media is playing games with the words. Their stories actually have been debunked.
Right.
The mainstream media's stories about fake news have been debunked. Seth Rich, no, it has not been debunked. It is not proven. There is a world of difference between saying I can absolutely say with certainty that it is debunked
Right.
versus it hasn't been proven versus we're not sure. So that's the game, right? We talked about intelligence, we talked about reporting, investigation. It's all about investigation, right? Where's the proof? Show me the evidence. What are your sources? And so I'd like to see proof. I'd like to see, okay, you're telling me it's a robbery. Great. How do you know that?
Right.
Where are the robbers? Have there been robberies in that area? There have been robberies in that area. It's in general that area where I'm working on an investigation right now. First video, I believe, is coming out today, very soon. It's a high crime area. Okay, high crime area. Multiple muggings have been going on at the time. Bars on the windows of the first floor, kind of thing, walking around. But at the same time, part of the area is being gentrified.
You're saying
now,
where Seth Rich was killed?
where he lived and he was killed. He was killed 1 block away from where he died. Where he lived.
Right.
Killed 1 block away from where he lived, and or shot there. I guess he died later at the hospital.
Right.
And so the area is kind of seeing this rebirth right now, where a lot of new buildings are being gentrified. So there's got a lot of revamping, remodeling, new buildings going up, condos going in. So suddenly you're seeing these, lower income families that have been living in this area of Northwest DC for 30, 40 years, and then their generations down, their kids that have been growing up there, versus these younger 20-somethings, 30-somethings that are working in politics, working on the Hill, working for different consulting firms that are able to afford these townhouses in the same neighborhood that are typically a little bit more affluent and much younger. They're not here for families, they're here for work. So, but you've got in these neighborhoods these two cultures almost living together, and I would say there is a bit of a culture clash there. You can even see the difference in the buildings themselves. Some buildings are brand new; they've just gone up. They look very nice. Some buildings they're older. There isn't an easy way to say it. They're older. They've got bars on the windows. They're a little bit more run down, and you see the families that have been there for 30, 40 years. And I talk to these people. And so they're saying that you're seeing a lot of changes in the area, and this all around. It's called Bloomingdale, this area where Seth Rich, where he lived, where he was shot.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of changes, a lot of cultural shifts there. And my question is, so if that were the case, where is the investigation? The one theory out there, right, is that because this guy Seth Rich was a DNC data manager, and that the fact that he was murdered just 2 weeks or so, 12 days, I think, right before the WikiLeaks came out, was there a connection? Was he the person that leaked the WikiLeaks, right? And then the official narrative at this point has been it was a robbery that went wrong.
Right.
Okay? It seems to me that if the robbery that went wrong narrative is true, then the DC PR department should see that there's this growing, cacophony, really, of people talking about this WikiLeaks angle. And if they had some basic evidence, ballistics, autopsy reports, any of these things that they could put out to specific, and I really think that it would quiet down the voices tying it to WikiLeaks if they could put out some basic information on the case. And so my question really, not for the investigators of the DC police, but for the PR department. Like, you guys got to realize from a PR perspective, you are churning the rumor mill here by your silence, by not putting out anything. And so why not put out some evidence? Why not, let people know? There's been multiple FOIA requests that have gone out from Judicial Watch, from other organizations.
Body cam footage.
The body cam footage, something. There was a lot of precedent for this. Body cam footage is released
cameras
very
all
often.
around in the area.
There's cameras all around, CCTV, dash cams. We've seen this in many other shootings. Certainly, some of the shootings, Freddie Gray, for example, not a shooting, but a very
Video of him getting.
the video from the Freddie Gray incident was very big, and we I think we're getting up to our time here, but that video was released. So
Well, let me just ask you something real
haven't
quick.
these videos been released?
You brought up some interesting terms, proof and evidence. Two different things that a lot of people have a very difficult time differentiating between. There is a lot of evidence surrounding the Seth Rich case, and we saw when Rod Wheeler came out and started talking about his investigation, he was just immediately personally attacked. People are saying he's been debunked, but yet no stronger evidence, contrary to what he's saying, has been presented. But I mean, unfortunately, I guess we're running out of time, or do we have just another minute to talk some more about Seth Rich? Because
I think we know, well, maybe one more minute, yeah.
so, you know, I think you and I have discussed George Webb a little bit, and George has been doing a really interesting investigation.
I've seen some of George's videos.
Just
His work.
today, he has identified that the doctor who was the attending physician who dealt with Seth Rich was this guy who seems to have two different names, and he, you know,
That's interesting. I haven't heard the name from yet. I would love to get with George. Maybe we can compare notes.
I think what we've got to do is when we have a little more time, let's get together again and maybe we can get everybody involved with the investigation with George, because I think he is really, every day, George is uncovering new evidence, new information that makes the case stronger. And on the other side, we just keep hearing, oh, you know, some unknown source says that somebody in the Trump administration spoke to the Russians.
Awesome. And, you know, maybe we can even pick this up after the event.
Okay, sure. All right,
Okay,
thanks.
Great. Thank you.